Hello and welcome to This Album with me, William Hann. It's the podcast where each episode a guest and I will deep dive an album of their choice. And we're going to discuss the songs, the shows, the artwork. But what I really want to know is where my guest first heard the album and the emotional attachment they have to it. Who knows? We might even have a bloody laugh while doing it. Now, make no mistake, today I am joined by a podcasting behemoth. Ryu, Chun-Li, Ken, M. Bison, Dowsim. When the average person sees an innocuous top 5, today's guest sees opportunity. Michael Jackson, too much hairspray, unnecessary breasts in a movie. Where the average person would consider this a flippant conversation about things that were acceptable in the 80s, today's guest sees opportunity. A grapple, a headlock, a jab, a submission. Where the average person sees a battle between MMA warriors, today's guest sees opportunity. Oh yes, we are joined by a podcasting warlord. And I haven't even listed all the podcasts he does. All the way from Essex, it's Mr. Stuart Whiffen. Stu, how are you doing, brother?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. That was quite an epic intro.
Hours. Absolutely hours that took me, Stu. That was the first dress rehearsal, but we came out of it with no fatality, so I'll take that. How's life treating you, man?
Everything is okay. It's nice to be asked on a podcast rather than be hosting one. So it's really nice. And I feel, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. And I look forward to chatting tunes with you.
Thank you very much indeed. Have you done many other people's podcasts, Stu?
I've done a few. I've done Films to Be Buried with Brett Goldstein's podcast.
Of course, yes.
Which was wonderful. That was before he won about 15 Emmys and become a superstar. It was, yeah. And I've been on Mr. Scroobius Pip's many times. I believe there's one coming out in the next couple of days. The Scroobius Pip Drunkcast will be out over the next week or so. So I'm on that. And I've done a few music ones over the years, and but nothing for, I don't know. I don't think anything since lockdown, really. So this is really nice.
A pleasure. Well, obviously, you mentioned a bit about other podcasts you've done, but let's talk about the podcast that you actually do yourself, Stu. So for those that are a bit uninitiated, what do you do?
I stumbled into it through being friends with Scroobius Pip. I'm a club promoter, and I met Pip. Lives around the corner, and we put together a club night when Pip was kind of, doing his thing in music, and then he decided to start a podcast off the back of a radio show that he was doing. And I didn't really know much about podcasts. I'd only ever listened to the Ricky Gervais one. And just was really liked the idea that anyone can do it. It was completely DIY. You didn't have to have a background in broadcasting or radio or anything. You could just press record and crack on, and that appealed. And so I set up a podcast called Hardcore Listening with my friend Chris, who's another one of Pip's friends. And Pip was really sort of gracious and helped us out and put us on his network. And it went straight to number 1 on iTunes, which was crazy because neither of us have got any kind of background in anything like that. So it was really lovely. And it was way back when there was far fewer podcasts on the planet. So it was a lot easier to kind of get noticed then. And I've got a podcast called Off the Beaten Track, which is a music podcast. And I've recorded probably just shy of 600 episodes of that. And
crazy, isn't it? And don't be afraid to flex a bit here, Stu. You've had some pretty heavyweight guests on there, haven't you? So come on.
Yeah. It's been all right. I've had the Foos on. I've had Tommy Lee, Motley Crue, Blur, Suede.
You've had a buddy Spice Girl on, Stu.
I have had a Spice Girl on. Yeah. Yeah, she was really nice, Mel.
She was a great guest. She was wicked, wasn't she?
Yeah, and so music and MMA are my two absolute loves, and so I think with anything to do with podcasting, you have to have a passion for what you're talking about. Otherwise, the listener will just go, he's just doing this for the sake of doing a podcast. He's not really feeling it. And I think Off the Beaten Track is just me having an opportunity like what we're doing today, just to speak to someone else who loves music about music, and it's the best. Yeah. And the same with MMA. I had Blake Garrison from the In-Betweeners come on Off the Beaten Track to talk music, and then we both realised we're both equally as obsessed with MMA, so we started our own MMA show as well. So yeah, and my most favourite is my once a month podcast with a gentleman called Cunt and the Gang, who is
he's a character.
Yeah, I don't know how you'd explain, but he's had more chart success than most people I've had on my podcast. I think he's had like 6 top 10 hits now each Christmas. There's not one this year. Generally, he's saying something quite negative about Prince Andrew or Boris Johnson, and he's wonderful. He's my oldest, bestest friend, and we've been friends for over 40 years, and we do a podcast once a month called Acceptable in the 80s. And if you like to laugh, then I'd direct you in the way of that podcast because it'll make you laugh.
So before we get into today's album, what music do you reckon you were listening to before you discovered this artist and the world around them?
Right, so I'm 51, and so I
no,
like
no way,
being kind now, brother. But I lucked out. Sort of hitting the right age. So I left school in 1989 and started college in 1989, and that was a really exciting time. It's actually the year that this album that I'm going to talk about came out. But so much was happening in music then. So you had what was going on in Manchester was absolutely erupting. So everybody was talking Rosies, Mondays, and in spirals, and acid house was happening, illegal raves were happening, hip hop was becoming huge. And it was just a real hotbed of new and exciting music, and it absolutely hooked me. But the music that I was obsessed with was electronic music. And as a kid in the 80s, I was always obsessed with synth music, synth pop. And then I've become absolutely fascinated by mute records. So coming from Basildon Way, it's only natural that you grow up on a diet of Depeche Mode because they're the hometown heroes. And they're still to this... I very nearly chose one of their records for today. They're one of my favourite bands. And up until then, I think all I was listening to was Pet Shop Boys, Erasure, Depeche Mode, and some sort of industrial stuff like sort of Nitzer Ebb, Front 242 and stuff like that. That was what I was really into. And then kind of just got absolutely pulled into the world of guitars around about then, because I think because of things like the Roses and what was going on with Manchester, like guitars and electronic music was obviously being fused and creating these amazing things. And Andy Weatherall was probably at the forefront of making their moments happen. And it hooked me, and it proper pulled me in.
It's funny because that sort of age, you're always going to experience some sort of cultural shift, aren't you? Discover your tribe and you discover that sort of subgenre that you belong to. I mean, how seismic a shift was it when you discovered this album, do you reckon, Stu?
I think it was... It's really weird because before we recorded this today, I went for a walk and I put the album on in headphones and revisited it just to kind of remind myself why I love this record so much. And I think what I should stress is I came to this album a little later. I went back to it after the first album, after the album that followed, because that album was the one that pulled me in. And then, like anything for me, if I find something that I like, I'm very obsessive and I will just go deep diving and I want everything. I want full back cut. I want everything. And I didn't have to go back far. I only had to go back to the album before. And it just, for me, felt like it encapsulated everything that I liked in music.
Well, on that note, Stu, I think it's about time you told us who we're discussing today.
We're going to discuss a fantastic band, if not one of the greatest bands that ever existed, from Athens, Georgia. And that band's called REM, Rapid Eye Movement. And the album I've chosen is the first record that they released on Warner Brothers after being signed to RS Records for years. I'm going to go with Green.
Thank you very much, Stu. So, Green is the 6th studio album by American rock band REM. Despite it being their 6th album, it is still considered their early stuff, as it was released before the stratospheric breakthrough Out of Time. The album was released in 1988 and reached 12 in the US Billboard 100 and 27 in the UK. It was their second time recording with producer Scott Litt, who went on to produce 5 more of the band's albums. And the band performed in Georgia and America, as mentioned. And despite their DIY beginnings, in 1996 they went on to sign the largest record deal ever seen at the time for an eye-watering $80 million. Bloody hell. The band have achieved critical and commercial acclaim and have been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So, first things first, Stu, how much do you not give a fuck about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
I mean, I think in the UK, we're not that bothered, are we?
We are not.
It's a very American thing. But if a band I like does get inducted and I know that they're performing, I will watch that performance. And I believe Eddie Vedder inducted REM. And I could have chosen a Pearl Jam album for this as well. And I believe he come on stage and performed Man on the Moon with REM at their induction into the Hall of Fame. Yeah, I don't really care about it. It's like, I don't need an award, a band to get an award, to justify how good they are. They're good because they make great music, and it's as simple as that.
Absolutely. So I'll be honest with you, Stu, I wasn't surprised when you chose an REM album. I've listened to a lot of your output over the years, and you've always been a big ambassador for this band. And I keep thinking to myself, one of these days I will listen to an REM album. Stu's going to get me to listen to one of these albums one of these days, and it's finally happened. I'd never listened to an REM album before.
Really?
This. Yeah. It's shameful, really. And this year actually seemed like a bit of a catalyst, because I was on Twitter one day and there was an SNL video from when they'd done Radio Free Europe. And it's a song I'd never heard before. And I was like, fuck, this must be one of those good songs that Stu keeps messing on about. It's bloody brilliant. I was like, right, so this is the year. I listened to REM this year. And finally, here we are. Got to say, Stu, pretty good album, isn't it?
Yeah, it's got a bit of everything. It really is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
So you sort of leaned on a little bit earlier when we first started talking about what was going on in your world at the time. But what do you reckon? What made you choose this album today over that Depeche Mode or someone else you mentioned?
I think for me, like there's albums that I think are perfect, and when you asked me to, when you kindly asked me to come on here and talk about an album, instantly when people ask me album, I go Marvin Gaye, What's Going On? But I just thought the album's been talked about to death, and I could have gone Pet Sounds, but it's been talked about to death. So I thought I'm going to go with probably the first record that absolutely knocked my socks off, and I think through the Stone Roses and what was happening in guitar music, and going to my club as a clubber before I worked there, I was exposed to so much music, and I remember my mate John bought Orange Crush because I believe that was maybe the only single that charted in the UK from Green.
Well, they released 4 of them, but I've not got the details of how they charted, actually, which
Pop
probably
Song.
explains it, yeah.
They released Pop Song, Stand, Get Up, and maybe Turn You Inside Out, possibly.
It was actually, yeah, I've got it here. That's right.
Yeah.
You're good at this, aren't you, Stu?
And yeah, and I remember my mate bought Orange Crush, and I will say Orange Crush is my least favourite track on the record. But I remember seeing them on Top of the Pops, and I was like, guy's got a megaphone. It's got a fucking megaphone. That's the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I thought Michael Stipe was just different level cool. And Peter Buck was playing a Rickenbacker. And
they're the best, aren't they? The best guitars.
Of course they are. If Johnny Marr can play one and Peter Buck can play one, why would you ever play anything else?
Other guitars are available, but why would you want one of them?
Exactly. And yeah, George Harrison played a Rickenbacker as well, didn't he?
He's played a Ricky over the years. He's played a Telecaster over the years. He's played the Gretches, of course. George, he's not afraid of mixing it up a little bit. To be fair, they've all had a good time with the Rickenbacker, the Beatles, haven't they?
Absolutely, and the Birds, obviously. But yeah, for me, like, I think when I heard this album for the first time, and it was introduced to me by my mate John that went out and bought it after loving Orange Crush. I was like, okay, right, I'm going to go and investigate this a little bit more. And as soon as I put it on, the opening track, Pop Song, is like really kind of stabby and jaunty, and I was like, wow. And it didn't sound to me too dissimilar from Orange Crush, but it was when it gets to like tracks like You Are Everything and The Wrong Child, and my favourite track on the album's called Hair Shirt, I just absolutely fell in love with Michael Stipe's voice. I was like, this is, and I still think he's one of the greatest vocalists ever. I think when people talk about fantastic singers, they never mention Michael Stipe.
Yeah. It's not one that comes up very often, is it?
No.
And he's got a very unique voice. It's very instant.
So unique. It's so unique. And yeah, and I remember sort of listening to it a couple of times and thinking this is really good, and then not really sticking with it. And then sort of fast forward a couple of years, and REM release Out of Time, and Losing My Religion becomes this global mega hit, and I just, that record Out of Time blew my mind. I think Losing My Religion is still one of the greatest love songs ever written. And
so just to check then, Stu, was you said you saw him on Top of the Pops. Was that during this album or during Out of Time?
No, during Green. I remember Pops and being kind of caught up with it a little, but not really loving Orange Crush. But when my mate played me the record, I remember hearing the sort of slower stuff and thinking, this is really good. This guy's got an amazing voice. And then kind of didn't really sort of stick with it until they released Out of Time and, you know, Losing My Religion and Shiny Happy People.
Need a little push to get there, did you?
And yeah, Neil, at this point, they're fast becoming the biggest band on the planet. And Out of Time blew me away. And, you know, all of a sudden, you could not move for seeing that band on MTV.
Yeah.
They were winning every possible award. And I was like, I need to go back and check that record. And I went back, and as much as I love Out of Time, I just thought, this is better. This is just a little bit better.
Okay, so I was going to ask then, you've mentioned very kind words about both albums there. So what made you choose Green over Out of Time, do you reckon then? Was it trying to be the indie option, do you reckon, Stu? Or?
No, I'd love to say, like, I'm not that indie wanker to try and be cooler than
You're in a safe space here, mate, don't worry.
Like, it's just not me, mate. And yeah, I went back, and because previously to, as you said, there's six studio albums. There's 5 records that come before that, and for me, they were the American Smiths. They were like kind of doing what the Smiths were doing, and they were as prolific as the Smiths with their output. It was so constant, and it was constant progression. And obviously, you know, by the time we get to the end of the 80s, we didn't have the Smiths no more. Whereas REM had kind of cut their teeth doing very similar sorts of guitar, really solid guitar, sort of college rock, but then they just signed that bigger deal with Warner Brothers, and for me it just felt that they just really hit their stride and just matured, but didn't kind of mature into like dad rock territory or anything like that. They just made fucking great music, and again, like Out of Time followed by Automatic for the People, which is, you know, probably one of the biggest selling records in the 90s, is just the progression from Green to Out of Time to Automatic, and then to just kind of go completely different and just ditch the mandolin, because we should get
into the mandolin, shouldn't we, Stu?
Yeah. Because we mentioned like Lose My Religion, and yes, that's so driven by the mandolin, and Peter Buck apparently by the time he got to Green was bored of the guitar. And so I was like, look, and he brought the mandolin to the table, and that features a lot on Green and loads on Out of Time as well. And I just think it's such a beautiful instrument, and I'd love to be able to play it, but it just looks way too complicated for me.
I'll be honest with you, Stu. I would argue it's probably a bit too much mandolin for little old me, in all honesty.
Really?
Oh, man. What I didn't seem to realise it on this album, that you could have a mandolin but also have drums in the song as well, Stu. I think there's definitely a few songs where they could replace the mandolin for a electric guitar and still get the drummer involved and have a proper anthem on their hands. I mean, the songwriting's fantastic, but I would argue Too much mandolin for me.
Well, there was lots of mandolin popping up in bands around then. The Wonder Stuff used it a lot on Never Loved Elvis. And a lot, I guess look, the Waterboys were using mandolin and stuff. And obviously the Pogues were. So there was a lot of it in the sort of late 80s, early 90s in some fantastic alternative music. And yeah, I'm going to disagree with you. I love it.
To be fair, you have just triggered a little memory in me, actually. Like 2006, I was in a band. Do you remember the band Larrick in Love?
Of course.
Yeah, they had a lot of banjo.
Yeah.
But honestly, I was bloody. If I had a bit more money, Stu, I was that close to fucking investing in a banjo. Nearly made a terrible mistake there. But obviously, you mentioned the Smiths there. I know they're a big band for you, aren't they? And it sounds as though REM arrived just in time for you then, just as the Smiths are splitting up. You discovered the next band. Is that sort of how it worked?
I think as well as listening to all that electronic music, getting to college in '89 and really kind of like absolutely, completely and utterly falling in love with Morrissey. I know, let's just park up what Morrissey's been saying and doing over the last 5 years. And let's just go back to the period of time that we're talking about where he and the Smiths, and I think not just Johnny, but I think Andy and Mike are very underrated. I think they're absolute geniuses. As is obviously Johnny Marr, and I think Morrissey is, and it's really weird. It feels like Morrissey's like a dirty word now, and I understand why. I don't.
People get a bit stiff, don't they, when the M word gets mentioned, and the shoulders go a bit. Where's he going with this?
I know, and it's strange, on Off the Beaten Track. I always ask guests because I ask them to suggest tracks on the pod, and people have chosen Michael Jackson records, and have chosen Morrissey records, and I think it's important. Lots of people have said, I had Alan McGee on, and I'm trying to think of some of the older fellas that we had on that all basically said, well, I was brought up on glam, and there's one artist that we love, but we can't talk about it anymore. And so I'm always interested in that kind of discussion as to whether someone can separate the art from the artist. And I think I've had to do that with Morrissey.
Yeah. I'm quite fortunate, I think. I've never had someone I love too much. I've never been too tested on this, really, Stu. I've had my heart broken so much. Maybe a few actors and things like that, but But, so far, Liam Gallagher's not nonced anyone, and neither is Alex Turner. So once that happens, I'll give you a call and ask your advice on how to cope with these situations. But until they go on a massive racist outburst, I'm all right for now. But how did you find that? Must have been really mad for you, having a hero turn into a bit of a cunt. How did you manage that?
I just kind of, the first, there was always kind of controversy about Morrissey. He's such a divisive character anyway. And lots of the things that he said were like digging out politicians and the royals. And I'm all about that.
Yeah, shooting up's okay. Or punching up, sorry. Punching up's great. We love seeing that.
And he was, and what I liked about Michael Stipe and what I like about Morrissey, it's a beautiful photo of them both together around the time of Out of Time, is the fact that we now live in a world where you will guarantee, like, if you're on Twitter or on your Instagram, you'll know what Liam probably had for breakfast this morning. He's probably banging on about a new pair of desert boots he's got, and whatever he's up to, a picture of his, with his boys or whatever, or Molly, and that's all great. But for me, I didn't know if Morrissey or Michael Stipe was straight, gay, what they were about. They were such untouchable people. They were so in a different world, and it just seemed like, and I love that. Like, does anybody know what Bono's wife looks like? I don't think so. And if you can be one of the biggest, most famous people on the planet, and no one even knows what your other half looks like, you got something right. And I think that era, and I'll put Bono in that as well, because the early 90s, U2 were making some, in the late 80s making some amazing records, and And they were the most famous people on the planet, and yet they were so private. And I think that's lost now. And I think the ins and outs of everything. They don't feel like that they're just from being down from outer space. They just feel like and I'm an Oasis fan, and Liam Gallagher makes me laugh, but he doesn't feel like there's going to be any surprises to him. He's Liam. You know what you get, and I think, yeah, and maybe I don't know, maybe Alex Turner as well. I just think like.
Yeah, I was going to say Alex is the exception to all this, I think, isn't he? He's a man that's definitely managed to carry a lot of mystique and intrigue about himself, which I think there's a place in my heart for both of it, right? I like the idea of like a bloke next door, you sort of know what's going on in their world, and sort of a relatable rock star. Yeah. But I also want the other side of it as well, the Stipes, the Morrisseys, the Alex Turners, where I don't know what the fuck he's about. I don't know what haircut he's going to have next or which bird he's hooking up with. I don't know any of that. And that's great. I need both sides of it, I think, Stu.
Yeah. I think so. I think that's what makes it interesting, because we live in a world now where you can pick your phone up and you can hear everything, you can see everything, but everything is like literally 2 seconds away. And I think that, I sound like an old bastard, but like that for me detracts a little bit from attaching memories to music and memories to fashion and memories to film and things like that, because there's so many of my memories in music are attached to, I remember where I bought that record. I remember sitting, in my mate's car on the way, I'm looking at it thinking, I can't wait to get in and play this. And and I do think, and I remember like album artwork, like you tell me a record that's been out in the last maybe 15 years where everybody's talking about the cover, where you can go around Camden Market and that cover's on every T-shirt. Yeah. It doesn't happen anymore because album covers are tiny little squares on phones. They're not these beautiful things that you have with vinyl, and less with CDs. And they're the only two things that I think are lost in the time from this record that I love so much to now, is that sort of the beauty of the artwork and just having to kind of work for a little bit. And if you wanted, I had a few REM posters. I had to go to Camden and buy it. I had to go all the way to Camden from Essex just to buy one poster.
Did you know it was in stock, though, Stu? You might have turned up and they'd sold out, mate. That's a big risk situation, isn't it?
True. But, yeah. Can I tell you an REM story?
I thought you'd never asked you. Please.
I've got a good one for you. So, around 2001, 2002, I might be wrong, might be a year or two out, but they headlined Glastonbury, and they decided they were going to do a warm-up show at Brixton Academy. I managed to get a ticket, and I went to the gig, and I was so excited to see such a big band. My favourite band is such a small venue, and small venue by REM.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And also getting to see them in one of my favourite venues. And so anyway, I make sure I'm right at the front, and out they come, and they're just fucking remarkable. And REM always finish with "It's the end of the world as we know it," and so Michael Stipe is there, and he comes down the front, and he's singing, and I am literally like a 14-year-old, like One Direction fan, and I'm like hand out in front of me. And he comes down right in front of me and gives me the microphone. And so I get the mic in my hand, and now I've got two things going through my mind. I'm holding Michael Stipe's microphone, and this is fucking crazy. But I also was in a band for a lot of my younger years and had a record deal, and, never got to play Brixton, but would have loved to have played Brixton. And I thought, this is it. I'm playing fucking Brixton, and I'll use my backing band. And so I could hear Mike Mills doing the harmony, which is that time I had some time alone. And Michael Stipe's normally singing "It's the end of the world, and I feel fine. So I thought, I'm fucking going for this. So I have just gone for it. Whilst there is hundreds, what felt like hundreds of people jumping on me, trying to get this microphone. And I've literally sort of gone down into this like shell, and I'm just singing my lungs out until security pull me up, and I'm dishevelled and all over the place. And Michael starts right in front of me, and he mouths the words, "Are you okay?" And I say yes, and give him the mic back. And I just think, I've just completed life. And then that Saturday at my club, there was a tall, it was a freakishly tall lad called John. I don't know what his second name was, but he was there, and he always used to come up to the DJ booth and ask me to play REM records, and I'd obviously always oblige. And he'd come up and he went, "You was at the gig, weren't you?" I went, "Yeah." He went, "Yeah, so was I." I said, "Oh, I didn't see you." And he went, "No, I heard you." I went, and he then went, "Here you go." And he's got the bootleg of that gig. So I have the CD of me singing.
Oh, Stu, that's awesome.
With REM. It sounds like the worst kind of hammered Danny Dyer just screaming over the top of this beautiful harmony and wonderful band. But I have ultimately fronted REM.
At Brixton Academy, no less. That's massive, Stu. I've got a similar story to that if you're ready for it. Me and a couple of mates, we went to Rockwerchter, what was it called? No, Rockwerchter Festival out in Belgium. We was there a couple of years ago, went to watch Arctic Monkeys, and the lineup was crazy, man. Like Albert Hammond Jr., Noel Gallagher, Idols, it was Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. Wow. It was crazy. And just the day before the festival, we'd watched England play Sweden in the Russian World Cup. And, Gareth Southgate fever throughout the whole place. A lot of sunburnt Brits wearing England tops. It was great. The atmosphere was amazing. And during Nick Cave's set, obviously very famously stays at the front row, doesn't he? He's got this whole time there of hands on people and singing in people's faces, and much like yourself, sticking microphones in people's faces. And at one of the pivotal points of one of his songs, he stuck the microphone out, ready for someone to sing like Red Right Hand. And in front of 60,000 people, someone just grabbed the microphone and shouted, "It's coming home!" in the middle of the song. So they had their moment as well, their Stu Whiffen moment.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
It wasn't quite as harmonious as yours, maybe, Stu.
I've got a good Nick Cave story.
Go on.
So he released, I very nearly chose No More Shall We Part album by Nick Cave for this. It's my favourite Nick Cave record. But he done a secret gig at Bush Hall, and the DJ promotional company used to send me all my promos for the clubs. Said, "Oh, do you want to go?" And I was like, "Yes, please." And so me and my other mate called Nick went. And when we sort of walked in the Bush, have you been in the Bush Hall?
I'm going for the first time next month, actually. Never been. It's criminal. I live in West London. Mad.
Oh, super small, super lovely. So we walk in, and there's a grand piano. So I was like, just going to sit by the grand piano, because there was an ashtray on top of it, and back then you could...
I think I know where this is going, Stu, and I'm very excited.
So my mate Nick is sitting there, and I think it was only Nick Cave, Warren Ellis, and was Blixer in the band then? I'm not sure. But there was only three of them, and then Nick Cave come and sat down on that piano and then played that album pretty much, and a few other hits, whilst basically being 3 foot from me. And I had back then like one of them kind of old school cameras with a big flash, and there was lots of press there that were filming like were snapping away with no sort of flashlights or anything. And I just thought, yeah, he had a brand tuxedo, a brand velvet tux on. He looked so fun. He always looks fucking cool. He looked so fucking cool. And I was like, I've got to get a picture of this because no one's going to believe me. And I just literally went and wound my camera on, and then just went and just lit up the whole of fucking Bush Hall whilst I took this picture of Nick Cave. The record company come over going, "Who are you with?" I said, "Nothing, I'm just a fan." And trying to just like have this, no one will believe me that I've just sat up like by Nick Cave playing the piano. So they let me go. I basically said, "You'd have to wrestle this camera out of my hands." And I have that picture blown up nice and big,
amazing,
in my music room. And then afterwards, he was just standing at the bar. So I went and said hello to him and just said, "I really appreciate everything you've done. I love your music and thank you very much. don't want to be a pain. I'll leave you to it. And he was like, oh, no worries, mate. Thank you. He was very gracious and lovely. And I walked back down, and my mate Nick, it was free drink as well, so we was both battered. And my mate Nick, I can't believe he just went and said hello. I went, just go and say hello. Oh, I can't. I went, just go and do it. And so as he's walked up to him, just as he's kind of got in front of him, Jarvis Cocker's walked over and gone, Nick. And so basically Nick Cave has turned to speak to Jarvis Cocker, and then they've both stopped and sort of looked at my mate Nick, who's now just thinking, it took me a long time to pluck the courage to go and speak to Nick Cave, and now Jarvis is standing there as well. And they both looked at him, and it's still, I was actually around my mate Nick's on Sunday night, and it never fails to blow my mind. His opening line was, all right, Nick, my name's Nick. And Nick Cave just went, that's fantastic, well done. And he went, sorry, and just walked off. And it was like, oh, man. It was pretty horrible. But I got a photo and didn't embarrass myself as much as me mate.
Nicely done, Stu. Nicely done. I love a deviation, but should we get back onto green?
Yes.
Come on. So you touched on it a little bit about the artwork. I don't like sort of quoting from Wikipedia. I'm going to read a little bit about this actually. So do you know much about the artwork and where it all came from and stuff? No. So the cover art was painted by New York City minimalist line painter John McCafferty. Promotional copies of the album were housed in a mauve cloth-covered digipack with the title and artist embossed and a number 4 embossed over the R's. The colour and texture are made to imitate tree bark. All of this was wasted on me looking at the shitty little picture on Apple Music earlier, like we were discussing. So I know you're a big vinyl head. I mean, have you got a good copy of this?
I have got a good copy of it. I didn't know any of that though.
No.
Like that's interesting, and
that's the kind of insight you're going to get on this podcast going forward, Stu. So come back for future episodes, mate.
I love any kind of nerdy facts on music, mate. I'm all over it, mate. I'm all over it. Yeah, I didn't know. I know that the album cover for What Make for the People is a sign from a restaurant. Out of Time, I don't know. I know why it's called Out of Time, because they were out of time. They were going to call that record.
Yeah, I saw that in my research, actually, yeah.
Going to call it Cat Butt.
Call it what?
Cat Butt.
Well, thank God for schedules and...
yeah, do you know what I mean?
Deadlines, yeah. How often do you go back to this album, Stu? Is it a big part of your... Was it on Spotify Wrapped, I guess? Where did REM land in your Spotify Wrapped this year?
It's really weird. Like my Spotify Wrapped, I don't know much. Like I don't know what happened, but also my family use Spotify Wrapped.
Here come the excuses, Stu. All right.
But no. For some reason, Against All Odds by Phil Collins was in there, but I'm happy with that. That's a tune. But yeah, like, I think it's also got. I can't think what his name is, and I was like, who is that artist? But it's from the Bugsy Malone soundtrack. Would you give a little love and it all comes back to you? It's actually going to be my funeral song, and but I never knew who sang it, and so that was on my Wrapped. There was no REM on there. There was Nick Cave on there, and there was a band called The Prayer Boat, but there was no REM. Any of my mates, if you ask any of my mates like about me and REM, they will go, that guy would get in our cars in the early 90s and go, like, I was that irritated. I was forever the DJ. Like, I've done a tape and it's like, oh, you've done another fucking REM tape and you're going to try and make us all listen to. So I think I listened to REM relentlessly from like maybe 1990 all the way through to probably their last record that I really liked was probably Up. So I put a good shift in with them, and yeah, my Spotify Wrapped for 20 years would have been REM. Nothing.
Got it. Yeah, absolutely. And obviously you mentioned the Brixton Academy show. Is that the only time you've seen them live, Stu?
No, I've seen them a few times. I saw them at Earls Court, and I saw them at Milton Keynes Bowl. Milton Keynes Bowl was fantastic. That was when they released Monster, the album, after All Make for the People, and they were supported by Blur.
Bloody hell! Wow.
On that tour, Blur supported him in the UK, Oasis supported him in Ireland, and it was the first time that Blur played Country House live at that show.
Whoa.
And it was supported by, who was it, Blur, Belly, and I loved Belly, and a band called Magna Pop, another American guitar band.
Any good?
Yeah. Like,
Out of them.
it was a fantastic day. It was boiling hot, and yeah, Milton Keynes Bowls. Like, I've seen a few bands there. It's great.
It's underused, that venue, isn't it? It's amazing there. It's a really special space. I mean, it's so underutilized. It seems crazy to me.
Yeah, I don't know why it's not used more, but yeah, it's fucking big as well. It's like 90,000, something stupid like that, isn't it?
It's a lot of bodies. So obviously touched on it a little bit earlier, actually. I mean, 1990, sorry, you discovered this band. An impressionable time for anyone. How much of an impact do you think, like fashion-wise, this band had on you, Stu? How bad were your choices in 1990?
Oh, mate, like I have made some, like, I was in a band as well around then for years, and like two bands, and so I was the front person in one band, so I was constantly messing with what I thought was going to make me look like this absolutely super cool front man. Fuck me, did I get it wrong? Yeah, I've had ill-advised dreadlocks. I've had all sorts of, I mean, obviously the early 90s, everybody had very long hair. You know, Seattle was happening, so we all grew our hair. But Michael Stipe had a massive influence on me. So not just clothes, but just the way that he done. I bought a megaphone, and I used the megaphone because Michael Stipe had a megaphone, and yeah. But I bought the hat that he's wearing on the cover of Losing My Religion single. That when they done their Unplugged, he's got this fucking cool hat on, and I went everywhere to try and find the coat that he was wearing as well. I have multiple REM kind of t-shirts that I wish I still had, because some of them, like, you're never going to be able to get again, and they were so cool. But yeah, I had the shorts that he wore. Yeah, I was a little bit obsessed with him.
But the thing is, back then, it must be really hard to source this kind of gear. I always think, like, with fashion nowadays, everything's at the click of a button, right? If you want like an 80s inspired thing, 70s inspired thing, it's all just click of a button away. Back in your day, even my day to an extent, you had to, like, you can only buy what's put in front of you, right? So how the hell did you source these kind of clothes, Stu?
I would have to go, like, you know, get on the train and go to Camden Market, and just go around there and some of the shops and things like that. And yeah, I just
hope they had something in you liked.
Just hoped that, like, I don't know where I got that. It must have been Camden. I got the hat. Don't know where it is. I wish I still had it. It was fucking brilliant. But I remember going to my club before I worked there, literally dressed like Michael Stipe. I'd had a year of having a quiff and wearing, you know, flouncy white shirts and flouncing around the dance floor like Morrissey. But yeah, I was
all time well spent, of course.
Like, yeah, of course. I remember thinking I look great. Fuck me, I look like such an helmet. But yeah, it was wonderful. Moxup had a huge impact on how I looked, and also how I wrote songs. Like, it was so impactful on, like, me creatively as well. But when I, you know, started my second band, that's the one that had the record deal. Like, I was, you know, the songwriter in that band, and, like, I would use REM as, like, that it was the album Up, actually, that really got me working on, like, how to kind of, like, I love the way that he puts his words together, and I just really liked how they arranged their music, and what Scott Litt does. He's amazing. And what I also really liked about REM as well is they're a fucking gang, and that is so important for me.
Yeah, I thought the same about this. Yeah,
you know, and you mentioned your love of Liam and Oasis. Like, they were a fucking gang when they started. Like,
absolutely,
and
us against the world.
Yeah, and that's so important. The Smiths were a gang, and, like, the Ramones were a gang, the Pistons were a gang, and it's like, you look at them and, like, I don't think there's that many bands now that you look at and you just go, fuck me, yeah, they're a gang. Idols are a gang.
Riders are a gang. That's about it. You know, but the reality is it's impossible to fund a band nowadays unless mummy and daddy are bankrolling the entire thing, aren't they?
Exactly.
So I want to connect with 5 different people. I want to have a favourite one day. And even with Arctic Monkeys, actually, I always thought that Jamie was probably my least favourite. And over the last couple of years, he's become the coolest and the best dressed and my favourite. And I love the idea of like different focal points throughout their sort of trajectory. And yeah, I don't know. You lose a lot, don't you, when you only got solo artists like you have nowadays?
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. It's like I'm a working class kid, and I've always been into bands that are essentially working class. But I don't have an issue with people having different opportunities just because of what they're born into. Like I think I don't know how privileged Coldplay are, and I still, when you watch that. Have you seen that Head Full of Dreams documentary?
No, I've not actually. I watched Glastonbury this year, but I didn't know that didn't come out. No, what's the story?
It's on. I think it's on Prime, and it's. I love a music doc, and I'm not the biggest Coldplay fan at all, but that doc is fucking phenomenal.
Really?
Yeah, they're a gang. They're a proper gang, man, and there's 5 of them. Their managers on an equal split, and he has filmed everything from when they were at college. So it starts with them just sitting in their little halls of residence, just like jamming. I
just saw a bit of that because there was the Disney documentary that came out this year, the Camden documentary.
Yeah.
You're putting the background of it somewhere, Stu, by the sound of it. You mentioned the C word quite a lot today.
I probably was. Yeah.
But Coldplay are in that quite a bit. There's a lot of the early footage of them where he's got incredibly bad hair, but very big stadium-filling songs.
He walked off of that first gig at the Dublin Castle and says, we're going to play Glastonbury next year. And he fucking did. And he walks off stage after that, because it's all filmed, walks off stage at that Glastonbury gig, and he goes, we're going to headline next year. He fucking did. And you just think, I don't know, whether or not he had the time where he didn't have to get a job when he was at uni because maybe he had a little bit of backing. I don't know. But people that write good stadium songs. It doesn't matter how much money they've got. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Noel Gallagher didn't have a pot to piss in, and he wrote a shitload of them. And I think there's plenty of bands from the 70s and 80s that come from money that have gone on to write phenomenal music. I think I do think it stops bands, and it does. The reason I set up Off the Beaten Track, to go off on a little tangent here, Will, is purely because there's always so much pressure on bands to move to London to make it. And I've never understood that. And I think that if you're a working class kid in a band with another 3 working class kids and you move to London, you have to get a job to pay for that. And therefore you're not sitting there every day writing songs. You're not in a rehearsal room because you can't afford a fucking rehearsal room. So you have to go and work, which takes up all your time. And I think, whereas if maybe you're privileged, and then you don't have to have that job. You can just write and rehearse. And I think that's where you see the big change. And I think that's the same with acting as well. I just think the amount of people that can just move to London to try and become an actor, and if your parents can enable you to not do anything but just go to auditions every day, then it's a lot easier than having a full-time job and trying to get time off to go to them auditions. But I don't know, some of the best actors on the planet happen to be privileged. I know that I certainly didn't go to school with an Edward Thomas Hardy or a Benedict Cumberbatch. There weren't none of them in my school, I know.
Yeah, there weren't many of them around Ruislip for me either, mate, let me tell you. But it's funny because you'd have thought the internet might have democratized things a little bit, because we talked about in the last podcast I recorded, actually, it was in the noughties, it was the last sort of era of what had been a winning formula for the record label. You find an artist, you put money into them, you get the album recorded, and out it goes. But now with the internet, it's never been easier to record an album and put it out to the world. So hopefully, I don't know, maybe in the next couple of years we can get sort of more working class voices heard, because it's doable now with the internet, isn't it?
It is. But do you think it's a wash with new music constantly.
Well, there was a stat that came out this year. There was something like, I think in the first 3 weeks of the year, there were more albums released in that 3 weeks than there were in like 1985 as a whole, or something stupid like that. I forget the exact stat, but yeah, it's two things, right? So you would have discovered REM in a very linear way, right? It'd either been on Top of the Pops, on Radio 1, or in your mate's car who heard them on either Radio 1 or Top of the Pops. So there are different opportunities out there now, as opposed to just two ways into the music industry. So I don't know, maybe that amplifies the chance of getting heard, but then not having that mass appeal.
I think it's amazing. I think it's so fantastic that, you know, as I mentioned right at the beginning when I talked about podcasting, it being DIY, and you don't have to have a background in anything. You can just record a podcast and you can record it on your telephone, and then before you know it, it's on Spotify and you're a podcaster.
Yeah.
I love that. And I love that DIY element about music. But yeah, I think the whole thing is having such a shift insofar as, you know, you had to get your record playlisted on the radio. You know, you had to get, you know, if you really wanted to make it, you had to get on, like, you know, certain TV shows and things like that. And my kids don't watch live TV. And, you know, I think they're just on TikTok and they're on YouTube. And I think the fact that anybody can become famous on that and have their art, you know, exposed on them sort of things, he's fucking mad. I'm maybe too old to really get it. And, but I think it's exciting. But one of the things that I always ask guests on Off the Beaten Track as well is about the attention spans are getting shorter. And so when everything is so bite-sized on TikTok and on YouTube and also, you know, because everything is now being pushed towards YouTube Shorts. And then and all of the time that you're flicking through something on Spotify or on TikTok, there's just so many distractions. YouTube's got a big list of stuff down the side that you might like, that he's constantly pulling you. And like, so who's going to ever sit down and listen to Green and go, wow, that's great? Do you know what? Who's going to go back to Green a year later and go, I'm going to go back to that record that I listened to?
Especially when they've got the 2 or 3 bigger albums that came out afterwards. You're not going to start at Green unless Stu Whiffen, the bloody podcast guest, makes you do it. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Like, but like, you know, do people, because, and what I find, speaking to songwriters now, certainly more sort of commercial pop, like, you know, they're just about that intro, that hook, just get them. And like, and that's fashion. That's, you know, that's going to come and go. And I think Green is a stylish album, and style will always outlive fashion. Fashion comes and goes, style's there forever. And I think that's why we've still got people that are excited to go and see Oasis next year, because they've got a body of work that's so stylish and so epic and wasn't written for an algorithm. It wasn't written to try and, you know, jump on a little bandwagon of something that was popping off online. It was just 4 or 5 lads that just that's all they could do, and that's all they wanted to do, and they just served it up at the right time. But, you know, it has become part of the fabric of British, you know, pop culture. And I think REM done that, and I think the Smiths done that, and I think there's always going to be something, and I just hope that it still finds its way through and it doesn't just get engulfed in this vacuous online kind of jungle of Spotify and TikTok and just get kind of like pops up for 5 minutes and just gets spat out the other side. I hope that there's still people out there that want to listen to an album as a body of work, as a piece of art, rather than, you know, bands just going, oh, we're just going to release, you know, a couple of singles now and, you know, and then another EP and not really bother with an album.
Well, let's bloody hope so. Otherwise, this podcast has got a very short shelf life, Stu.
Yeah, of course.
But no, seriously, I remember Zane Lowe saying in an interview probably a couple of years ago now, I can't remember who he was talking about, but everyone's talking about the death of the album and like people don't consume albums the same way. But here's the problem, Stu. Artists still want to make albums. And if the artists are still creating albums and creating eras, is sort of the word they use nowadays, don't they? This is their, like Charlie XCX in a Brat era and things like that. If the artists want to keep making albums, well, I've got news for you. People are going to keep making albums. Even if people aren't consuming it the same way, it's the artists that are calling the shots, not the other way around.
But I think if the label doesn't, like Charlie XCX is an example of somebody that's going to have a lot of money thrown at her. And I think so she's got, a label will go, right, we need to get a new Charlie, a Charlie album out.
Yeah.
Whereas I think if we look at someone like, let's look at someone as an example. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of like a kind of breaking indie band that's, making a few waves at the moment.
Well, the Fontaines are the obvious example there, aren't they? Are they a bit too bigger for your example?
Yeah, something smaller than that, let's go back a few years. Something like the Pigeon Detectives, right? They have like a few hits and then they put out an album and then basically it just, the label's not got the faith in them and they're gone. And they're gone. I think it's, and I hope that labels still see value in albums and don't just kind of, if something don't shift straight away, just fuck them off. Because look at the Arctic Monkeys, their first record's great, but look what they went on to do. The first Smiths record's great, but look what they went on to do. Look at REM as a prime.
I was going to say this is something I'm going to bring up to you, man. This is their 6th album. And there aren't many bands that get to make a 6th album nowadays. No. If you've not made someone $100 million by album 2, if you're lucky, you're going to be dropped.
But by album 8, they sign a deal for £80 million because they've really hit their stride. Yeah. Crazy, man.
You don't get that kind of opportunity nowadays. Even the Jam's a good example for that, isn't it? The first 2 albums don't chart very well.
Yeah.
And it's the third one when things start, properly making money.
Yeah. Yeah. They were a gang.
Proper gang.
Yeah.
I love gangs.
Let's start a gang.
So I guess one thing I've not really got into is the actual songs themselves, really. We put the world to rights a bit here. I mean, I don't know how you're doing time-wise, Stu. You all right for a bit?
Yeah, I'm good, brother.
You're a good man. You're a generous man. So obviously, as mentioned, I'd never heard this album before. And the second I pressed play, I got a little treat. It sounded like a song I was very familiar with. There's a song on Baby Shamble's first album called 32nd of December. Mm-hmm. And the guitar chords at the start are exactly the same as Pop Song, which opens this. And it goes to this wicked guitar riff afterwards. It's a pretty immediate and comfortable intro to the album, isn't it, Stu? What do you make of the first song?
Yeah, it's my second least favourite.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Okay, we've got different. I think we've got different taste in this album, haven't we? I hate the mandolin drumless stuff, and you're loving that. I'm loving the poppier guitar-driven stuff. It's a miracle we're getting on so well here, Stu.
I know. I will tell you now that Adam Fiset of Baby Shambles is a huge REM fan.
Yeah, you had him on a guest before, haven't you? Yeah.
Yeah, that he's a local lad. He's a good boy. He is, and he's a big REM fan. But yeah, it's great pop song. Anyone that hasn't heard it, go on YouTube and watch it, because not only is Michael Stark dancing around with his shirt off, there's also boobs in the video as well.
There's boobs?
Yeah, there's boobs.
Come on. What were you doing? Right, Stu, I'll be 5 minutes, all right? I've got something to say. I think the only song really on this album that I was already familiar with was Stand, which is a lot of fun, isn't it?
Mate, I've been DJing my club for 32 years, man. And I reckon through the 90s, that was an indie dance floor smash, Stand. Any indie night you ever went to in London, anywhere you went at, you would hear Stand. It's just it's a great pop record. It's such a good pop record. And it's jaunty as fuck. That used to get played back to back with Here Comes Your Man by the Pixies, and they work perfectly together. It's
got a really fun piano part. I think they've nicked it from the Stooges. I Want to Be Your Dog. It's like a single note piano that just goes through it. Yeah. And it's absolutely wicked. It's got that key change in it as well. It's just a bit silly, isn't it? It's a bit silly and fun, which is not something I normally associate REM with, I don't think. Apart from maybe Shiny Happy People. But
it's the B-side of Stand called Cover of Fun Time by the Stooges, I think. Might be.
I'm going to do a fact check and insert that here, Stu. That's my promise to you. We'll either call you out or we'll pat you on the back. I can't wait to find out in the edit.
Yeah.
Hi, William Hann here, interrupting your listening experience to give you the aforementioned fact check results. So here it is. The REM 1989 single Stand featured the B-side Memphis Train Blues. Real sorry, Stu, but you were wrong on this occasion, but don't you worry. We still respect and admire your endless knowledge on REM. Back to the show. But then there's a song called I Remember California towards the end of the album. What do you make of this one, Stu?
I love it. Yeah.
Again, it's very different to the energy of the songs we've just discussed, actually. I've got a California playlist on my phone. It's on any songs that sound a bit sort of surfy and beachy. And
what's on there?
This ain't on there, let me fucking tell you. There is nothing California about this song, is there? It's, let's have a look. It's quite, honestly, it's got some legs, this playlist. Let's have a look. So it starts off with like Beach Fossils, Dive, Best Coast. You've got a band called DeLorean, Fiddler. There's a few Foles songs in there. Band called Best Friends. It's quite loose in terms of California. The Kills are in it quite a bit as well. There's some Lana Del Rey and Kings of Leon. A bit of Matt DeMarco. Anything that sounds a bit escapist and dreamy and surfy makes it onto what is a very, very long playlist. There's a bit of an NERD on there. And it is... Fucking hell, it's 64 hours long, Stu. It's a bit longer than I thought it was.
Christ, man.
Jesus, a lot of California.
You could walk to California and back and whilst that.
A few times, yeah. But yeah, I Remember California by REM is about as un-California as it gets. Very Joy Division to me. What do you reckon, Stu?
It's pretty somber, but then I think there's not a lot of kind of middle ground on this record. I think the joyous stuff is very upbeat. Your Orange Crush, your pop songs. Get Up is like Stand. Get Up is like such a fantastic pop record. But then Wrong Child, You're Everything, like all of them, Hair Shirt, and I Remember California are so somber. And that's when, for me, that's when you really get Michael Stipe's voice. Are you familiar with the track on there called Turn You Inside Out?
Of course. I wasn't before, but I am now.
That's the one, man. That is such a tune. And like, that's when he'd swing his megaphone. And there was they released the Green Tour. They released a VHS called Tour Film. And I must have watched that to death. And Michael Stipe in that, dancing, singing, Turn You Inside Out with a megaphone. And it's part David Byrne, it's part Iggy, it's frenzied, he's like a psychopath as he's delivering that song. He's screaming and it's fucking remarkable. And then boom, he'll put that down and then just break your heart with just like the most beautiful vocal on something so tender, like Perfect Circle, or some of the earlier, more somber tunes. And yeah, I can't recommend this album enough to people. Well, I think it's a real gem, and it's one of the ones. I've got albums if I'm feeling a bit low that I'll put on, and because I want a little kind of miserable music hug. I don't want to feel better. I just want to kind of have a little bath in it for a bit, and I've got albums that do that, and I've got albums that if I'm decorating or something like that, or if I'm going for a run, just give me joy and just make me smile. But this sits in the middle. This does, and I think that's what makes it so great. I can kind of feel joyous and fired up, but then like in the next track, like it smacked me in two, and I think that's what's good about it.
Well, that's a good point, actually. I think it's something that occurred to me a couple of years ago with the advent of having this in your pocket at all times. It has allowed for this like extra connection with music, because like back in the day when this album came out, you could either listen to it at home or you could listen to it in the car. Whereas now you can listen to music anywhere, and you can attach these memories to it. Like you mentioned going for a run, there's certain songs where I always think I know exactly where I was stood on that run when that song came on. Yeah. And as much as we bemoan the sort of demise of records, you do gain a lot by having these moments you can capture anywhere. Yeah.
I can remember, certain clubs. I remember before Trash, Errol Oaken used to DJ. His first DJ gig was at a place called the Gas Club in Leicester Square, and we used to go up there. on a Wednesday night, and there'd only be about 30 or 40 people in this little club. And this was way before anyone knew where Oldcombe was. And he will play just fantastic alternative records. And I can tell you every single REM record he played, and I can still
amazing
what I was wearing, what I was like, who was on that dance floor with me, which mates were there. And it's like, I love shit like that.
I love it. You're talking my language, Stu. It's my biggest indie regret is never going to trash.
Yeah.
I never went, and like I keep getting excited sometimes thinking he might do something, he might even like play a trash set at this club, and he never really seems to. He keeps it at a healthy distance and allows a bit of progress, Harold, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Have you had him on the podcast, have you?
I haven't. We spoke about it like a little bit, but no, who is he working with? And they said, I've just spoke to Errol, he said he'll come on. I was chatting to him, and then he was dating someone I know. And yeah, just never really. I should tap him up, really. Like,
be a good guest. I've had him on a few podcasts before. He's been a great guest. Actually, he's got some real stories. What a life he's had. My God,
absolutely. And he was like, even back then, he was the first person that I remember. I heard "Killing the Name" by Rage Against the Machine when he played it for the first time, and I'd go and listen to DJ, and I'd go back to Essex, buy the records, and then take them to my club.
Well, he had a wicked... when he was on the podcast list, I can't remember which podcast it would have been now, but he's got this story where basically he was the first person to hear Seven Nation Army outside of the band. He was at XL Records office one day in Ladbroke Grove, and they've just walked in, fresh out the box. This is the new White Stripe single. I'm fucking taking that, and I'm playing it at Trash that night. So imagine just hearing like Seven Nation Army for the first time in your life in that nightclub on that sound system. And he said that everyone's connected with it straight away because it was like quite an immediate song, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
Can you imagine?
Incredible.
But he tells the story better than me. I'm probably not doing it justice there, but
yeah.
Stu, we could do this for hours, man. But I've got a little something planned for us to wrap up today's podcast. I've got a little quiz for us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's called Who's That Michael?
Brilliant.
So, you a fan of The American Office?
I am.
Let's see then, shall we? You're a fan of REM. You're a fan of the US Office. Is it Michael Stipe or is it Michael Scott? Here we go.
Oh, you're taking me to fret level midnight. I'm all over it.
Oh, the heart's racing. I can see the adrenaline rush through you there, Stu. I'm tired of being this solemn poet of the masses, the enigma shrouded in the mystery. Is that Scott or is that Stipe?
Oh, fuck me.
We're off.
Stipe.
It's Michael Stipe. I'm an early bird and I'm a night owl, so I'm wise and I have worms.
Scott, all day long.
All day long, that one, isn't it? When you meet a stranger, look at his shoes. Keep your money in your shoes. Is it Stipe or is it Scott? I can repeat it if you need me to, Stu.
Yeah, please.
When you meet a stranger, look at his shoes. Keep your money in your shoes.
Stipe.
It's Michael Stipe. He's pretty good. He knows his Stipes from his Scots. My God. Here we go again. Next one. Buckle up. Never eat broccoli when there are cameras around.
Scott.
It's Michael Stipe.
Really?
Who knew he had such passionate opinions on broccoli and cameras? Not I, and not you either, Stu, I guess. This year, more people will use cocaine than read a book to their children. Is that Stipe or is that Scott?
Stipe.
It's Scott.
Really?
Michael Scott. This year, more people will use cocaine than read a book to their children. Michael Scott. Next up, do I need to be liked? Absolutely not. I like to be liked. I enjoy being liked. Is it Scott or Stipe?
Oh, that could easily be
That's
both.
the game, Stu. That's the game, mate.
These are really fucking tough, man.
I didn't say this to be easy, man. You're not coming in just for the laughs, mate.
I'm going to go Stipe.
You're going to go Stipe. It's Michael Scott.
Oh,
It's Michael Scott. Right, 2 more to go, Stu. You still with me? You still there?
I'm dying inside now.
Yeah. Absolutely. Would I rather be feared or loved? Easy.
Scott.
I've started, so I'll finish. Would I rather be feared or loved? Easy. Both. I want people to be afraid of how much they love me. Last one, Stu. Don't ever, for any reason, do anything to anyone. For any reason, no matter what, no matter where or who you are with or where you're going or where you've been, ever, for any reason whatsoever.
Right.
It's not, it's Scott.
Really?
Stu, come on, I thought that was an easy one.
Jesus Christ.
Well, look, it was a fair attempt, mate. There's a lot of confidence in some of those answers and a bit less in others. I think you can hold your head high, Stu. You've proved your credentials today. You're a stiped, and that's all right.
Do you know what they're called?
Tell me.
Disciples.
Of course they are. If I had 5 more minutes, I'd have got there, Stu, I reckon. Well, look, this has been a right laugh, Stu. I can't thank you enough for how generous you've been with your time today. Anything you want to plug while we're at it?
First, I just want to say thanks for inviting me on, mate. Like, you've got a great podcast, mate, and you're very good at it.
Oh, cheers, man. That's really kind of you. Thank you.
So thanks for asking me on. If you love your music, go and check out Off the Beaten Track podcast. Go check it out. It's wherever you get your pods. And if you like your 80s music, check out Acceptable in the 80s. And if for some reason you like men in spandex rolling around in an octagon, then come and check out me and Neil from The In-Betweeners, getting overexcited about it. But most importantly, if you like guitar music and you like indie music and you like really, really good kind of crossover dance music, then head down to Rayleigh and come to my club. It's called the Pink Toothbrush. It's the longest running alternative club in the UK, and it's wonderful. And you will hear all of the bands that we've spoken about today, and so many more. And you will be surrounded by lovely people in a lovely, dirty, sweaty venue called the Pink Toothbrush.
Stu, thank you very much indeed. This has been This Album. I've been William Hann. He's been Stu Whiffen. They've been REM. It's time to get out of here. Stu, nice one, mate.
Thank you.
Cheers, mate. That was wicked, man. Thank you so much for this, Stu.